Mugabe has unleashed his war veterans and his youth corps to rape the women of the opposition, to gang rape and brutally savage women simply because they are leading or voting for the opposition parties. And can you please do something about it? And we went in and we took a large number of affidavits from women all over the country. We secreted them out of Zimbabwe. We took the affidavits with various law firms in Botswana and South Africa. I'm glad these people are joining us, and I shall deal with their issues. Last weekend, and the placard, which she liked best, read, I'll try to get this exactly, in fact I wrote it down just a second because I wanted it to be right. We're here, we're unclear, get used to it. I wanted to make the point that the terrible raping and sexual violence which characterized Zimbabwe in the middle of the elections in 2008, the entire world knew about, knows about it now, knows that another election is coming in 2012, knows that the rape camps to which the women were taken are still in existence and will be employed again, and we're having tremendous difficulty getting anyone at the Security Council even to raise it or to acknowledge it. And again, if you're looking for international causes for social justice, then the cause of gender equality, it seems to me, trumps and transcends all others. And the 7th Millennium Development Goal, which speaks to the realm of social justice globally, was a role of environmental sustainability. That was the target. And that, of course, speaks almost entirely to questions of climate change and to the endless focus on global warming which the world requires, because all of the work that is being now around social justice and indeed the Occupy Toronto and Occupy Wall Street phenomena, all of these activities will ultimately be sabotaged by the consequences of global warming and climate change if we do not take this phenomenon seriously. The carbon discharge seems to know no limits because of the melting of the Arctic caps. This is really quite fascinating. Exxon has just entered into an extraordinary agreement with a Russian oil company for hundreds of billions of dollars potentially to go after oil at the bottom of the Arctic, because the melting has proceeded so far as to open passageways for exploration to take place. This was never the case before. And there is a feeling that whether it's oil or coal or natural gas, the discharge of carbon will continue, which ultimately will compromise everyone, because there is bound to be some kind of convulsion before the middle of this century. You want a social justice cause, that's a social justice cause, because inevitably the consequences of global warming will be most dramatically felt by the poorest people in the world. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that Southern Africa will be the target for much of the global warming results, because the drought and the conflict over water and the diminution of agricultural productivity will haunt those people forever. And the number, because arithmetically I'm always out of sequence, I really resent technology generally and numbers in particular. I had to make a speech yesterday where someone said to me, "We're tweeting during your speech, Mr. Lewis." I said, "Lay me in my grave without tweeting. I'll never be a part of this socialist, rancid social media paranoia. So for God's sake, contain yourselves. goal to which I did not direct myself, and that's because I've talked at it ad nauseam in Canada, was the goal to turn back the pandemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And may I just say to you that even though under antiretroviral treatment, AIDS is considered now in Western societies to be a chronic disease, on a continent like Africa, there are between 5 and 6 million people in treatment, finally. And there are between 9 and 10 million people who require treatment today. And God alone knows whether we'll ever get it to them, because the resources are drying out. And the interest in the Western world to sustain the lives of those who are infected is in really serious decline. And that comes at a moment which is ironically immensely frustrating, because for the first time ever we know how to defeat the pandemic. There is a theory which has now been proved astonishingly in practice, that if you can put everyone who is HIV positive into treatment, it will lower the viral load in their body. You give them antiretroviral drugs. It lowers the viral load in their body to undetectable levels. And then if they have unprotected sex, the transmission of the virus is extremely diminished, if at all. So the studies have shown increasingly that where you get widespread treatment, you get very significantly reduced transmission. And the National Institutes of Health in the United States, which tended to treat this somewhat cynically, did an amazing study with some 10 to 13,000 couples where one was HIV positive and the partner was HIV negative. And the study was to end in the year 2013 to see whether or not those who were HIV positive and on antiretroviral treatment would transmit the virus less significantly. And they stopped the study several months ago because they found that the reduction in transmission under full treatment was 96%. And they suddenly understood, as the whole world understood, that we had an answer. And precisely at the moment when it's possible to contain the human carnage, the world is moving away with the resources. And the final number of the Millennium Development Goals was an effort to achieve partnership, so that the developed world would not so significantly violate the commitments that it made. And it's worth thinking about that for a moment. Since 1969, we have had a target in the developed world of 0.7% of GDP, of gross domestic product, as the basis for foreign aid. Canada has never come closer than 0.49. Right now we're down to around 0.29, and because we've frozen foreign aid, it will drop to 0.28 or 0.27 by 2015. The average for the entire world is around 0.3, so we are raising less than half of what was agreed to in 1970, over 40 years ago. Secondly, the agreement at Gleneagles in 2005 that Africa would have $50 billion more per year by 2010 in order to respond to the issues which perplex it, we were 50% below the target. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, which is the most important financial vehicle in the world to deal with those infectious communicable diseases, just postponed the 11th round of its disbursements from 2011 to 2012 and announced that the amount of money it had would be reduced from 1.8 billion to 800 million because of the decline in donor financing. It is just appalling and beyond belief how whole fabrics are being shredded, in particular the human fabric, by the unwillingness of governments to honor the commitments they've made. And today I pick up a note on my computer about the cutbacks that are being contemplated in the United States, the consequences of which have now been calculated specifically by statistical agencies in the United States, and the cutbacks which are now being considered in Congress will lead to the following. Let me just read it to you exactly. 29,000 more infants will be born with HIV because of reduced funding to the prevention of mother-to-child transmission programs. Food, education, and livelihood assistance will not be available to 419,000 children through the Presidential Fund to prevent AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. Funding to treat 403,000 people for HIV/AIDS will not be available. 1.9 million fewer insecticide-treated bed nets to prevent malaria will not be delivered. 44,000 fewer people will be treated for tuberculosis. And through multilateral programming, 1.1 million fewer combination vaccines will be made available. Now just think about it for a moment. You want a war in Afghanistan? The money is always available. You want a war in Iraq? The money flows like a river. You want a war in Libya? The money is instantaneously available. You want to give particular support to bail out the banks? The money is always available. You want to make certain that corporate bonuses remain in place? The money is always available. Why is it that the money is available for war and for the multinational excrescences of capitalism, but a tiny fraction of that money is never available for global public health? You want a social justice policy? So for those who are passionate social justice aficionados, these are issues, all of them, that speak to poverty, the elimination of poverty, and the building of a more decent international community. In Canada, the same struggle for social justice is reflected in the erosion of equality and the growing numbers who are impoverished. Do you remember when Ed Broadbent in 1989, I was sitting beside Walter and I was thinking about it before we started. In 1989, Ed Broadbent introduced a resolution into the House of Commons supported by every single member in the House, regardless of party, to eliminate child poverty by the year 2000. Comes the year 2000, and the numbers, the absolute numbers of children in poverty have increased, and the percentages have increased as well. The richest 1% in Canada, 246,000 Canadians, with an average income of $405,000 a year, took almost 1/3 of all the income growth between 1997 and 2007. 1% took almost 1/3 of all the growth in income. By the end of 2009, 3.8% of Canadians controlled $1.78 trillion of wealth in Canada, representing something like 67% of the wealth in the country. And the gap, according to outfits like the Conference Board, and for me more legitimate outfits like the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, the gap is forever widening. Forever widening. And naturally, therefore, we see the kinds of protests we are seeing. The inequality which is felt acutely by Aboriginal peoples, the inequality which always has an ethnic or racial dimension, the inequality which certainly has a gender dimension,